So it's been revealed by Elon Musk's data dumps that Intel officers have been working inside of Twitter. There was a time when people understood groups like the CIA would actually create false companies to, on the surface, do one thing for the public, but underneath do a different service for their intel needs. For instance, when they helped prisoners escape from the Canadian embassy out of Iran, the CIA set up a front operation to produce films. And they had people of the likes of George Lucas and Steven Spielberg handing in proposals for films to this company.
They find an ideal site at the offices of the old Columbia Studios lot in Hollywood.
So it was Friday, and they started making phone calls, getting the phones hooked up. So by Tuesday, we were set up.
They furnished the offices right down to the paper clips and staffed them with family members of Mendez's local contacts. The aptly named Studio 6 Productions is born. From scripts lying around the studio, the team finds a mythological science fiction story. A Middle East location would make the perfect backdrop. The name of the movie is Argo. To make the production seem real, Mendez takes out full-page ads in the local Hollywood trade magazines.
You have to instill confidence in them, and if they know that you went to the trouble of going to Hollywood and taking out a full-page ad with their name on it, that's gonna go a long way. They're gonna buy into it very quickly.
They had to create layer after layer after layer of deception. Most of it would probably never be checked, but it was all necessary in case the one Iranian decided at the embassy, is this a legitimate company? Do I need to call and check?
So, like a lot of people, we always thought that Twitter was a social media site. Then why were all these intel agents working for Twitter? A lot of them. Could it be that Twitter was actually a propaganda tool and an intelligence gathering operation for different governments? Totally possible. More on that next. Let's say you were trying to staff a social media site. Who would you hire? Well, obviously, since it's a tech business, you would hire tech people, coders, software engineers to keep the place running. Then you'd hire administrative staff because you had to, some lawyers, a caterer, a flack or two, maybe an interior decorator if you wanted HQ to look good.
They had to create layer after layer after layer of deception. Most of it would probably never be checked, but it was all necessary in case the one Iranian decided at the embassy, is this a legitimate company? Do I need to call and check?
But how many spies would you hire? Well, probably none. Spies have nothing to do with the mission of a social media company. They would not be needed, and you wouldn't hire any opera singers either. Yet, for some reason, Twitter seemed to need an awful lot of spies. The upper ranks of Twitter, we now know, were absolutely loaded with people who once did intel work for government agencies. At least 15 of these people, and possibly many more. Most of them were hired in the wake of Donald Trump's election. Now, what were these people doing all day at what was supposedly a social media company? Well, that's the question, isn't it? We know that James Baker, who came from the FBI, has been accused of secretly censoring incriminating internal files before Elon Musk could release them to the public. Baker was fired for that, so that's some of what James Baker was doing at Twitter. But how about Charles Smith of Twitter's Trust and Safety Department? Smith joined Twitter after working at U.S. Cyber Command. Or how about Jeff Tokadjer, formerly a director of Naval Counterintelligence? What was he doing? Or Kevin Michelina, or Doug Hunt, or Mark Jaruzelski, or Douglas Turner, or Karen Walsh, Russell Handor, Vincent Lucera. All of these people once worked for the FBI as well. Their colleague Jeff Carlton came from the CIA. Patrick Conlon once worked at the NSA, and so on. And it wasn't just American intel officers who found a home at Twitter. The company hired foreign spies, too. In January, Peter Zatko was fired from his position as Twitter's head of security. Reportedly, Zatko lost his job because he complained about the level of control that foreign intelligence agencies had over virtually all of Twitter's operations. According to Zatko, there were operatives on Twitter's payroll from other governments, including China and India, and they had access to private user data. And those are just the details that we know about. Elon Musk was asked recently how many former FBI agents are currently employed by Twitter. but he wouldn't say. It's all pretty weird. Could it be that while the rest of us imagined that Twitter was a social media site, a place to vent about politics and sports and the Kardashians, could it be that Twitter was actually, maybe primarily, a propaganda tool and intelligence gathering apparatus for a variety of intel agencies?
So they can do this well, and I don't think it's a stretch to imagine that these companies perhaps started out in a different light, but they definitely now are being used for purposes of intelligence, and not just friendly intelligence, defending the homeland and your freedom. People whose interests are now tied up with Marxism, the WEF, and even China. Here in Canada, it was just revealed that our RCMP, which is our federal police force, has had a Chinese owned, essentially operated company getting contracts to take care of their communications over their intel.
This company on the outskirts of Toronto, now under intense scrutiny for its ties to China.
Sinclair provides emergency and secure communication services.
The government awarded Sinclair Technologies a contract last year to help the RCMP make its radio frequencies secure and in part prevent eavesdropping. But Sinclair's parent company, Hytera, is partly owned by China's government, and Hytera faces espionage charges in the U.S.
It's like hiring a thief to guard a jewelry store, except it's not jewelry. It's Canada's essential communications infrastructure.
Experts say the risks include spying or even jamming or shutting down the radio system altogether.
I find it disconcerting.
The government says it's now reviewing the deal.
We're going to be following up on this, finding out, first of all, what needs to be done to ensure that our communications technology is secure.
We're going to take a look at both the process and the contract, but we're vigilant against the threats that are posed by hostile state actors.
The opposition's demanding the contract is scrapped and any technology already installed ripped out.
It's almost something that you'd expect to be out of a spy novel, but characters in spy novels would never be that incompetent. So the Prime Minister has to take the responsibility for his own government rather than trying to blame everyone else all the time.
This former national security analyst says the government should have known. All it would have taken is a quick search online.
This looks horrendous. It looks terrible. It looks as if we don't have our house in order.
The government admits it didn't take security concerns into consideration when it awarded the $500,000 contract. Sources tell Radio-Canada Sinclair underbid the competition by $60,000.
Saving money might cost you something that's a lot more valuable than money in terms of your national security and your safety.
So, Ashley, I take it one of the problems here is this contract is in effect right now.
Yeah, Adrienne, the RCMP confirmed it's already started installing this technology in Ontario and Saskatchewan. And Sinclair Technologies has declined to answer Radio-Canada's questions about whether its equipment contains components made in China or if Hytera can access RCMP radio frequencies.
All right, Ashley Burke in Ottawa. Thanks, Ashley.
A shock to our Prime Minister, who had no idea, despite the fact he loves China, has said so openly over and over again. I'm at my new place of employment. I'm not going to be able to do these as often as I used to, but I had some time. And I was thinking, how far are we fallen? 2 generations ago, this never would have stood. These people are traitors. They should be treated as such, but we don't take it serious. Right now, in Ontario, our Conservative government.
Now, if it weren't for Rebel News, would you know just how many taxpayer dollars were being funneled into schools to collect the gender identity and sexual preferences of our young children? I'm Tamara Ugolini here reporting an update on a story that I ran a few months ago on how young school-aged children were being asked to disclose their gender identity and sexual orientation by way of a data collection survey put out by various school boards all across Ontario. And I wanted to know just how much taxpayers were paying into this outrageous program. And so naturally, I filed an access to information request to find out.
You know, folks, several weeks ago, it was reported that the latest data shows that only 59% of Ontario grade 3 students met the provincial mathematics standard, and that just 47% of grade 6 students met the threshold. So in the case of the grade 6ers, that's a failing grade. But forget about reading, writing, and arithmetic, because Ontario's Ministry of Education, well, they seem more concerned about whether or not little Johnny or little Janie is bisexual or pansexual or non-binary or two-spirited, etc.
Oh, there was a gender census or an identity-based census sent out to Ontario school boards recently, where they were to collect and solicit the gender identity and sexual orientation of children in grades as young as 4. So that's roughly children age 8 or 9, respectively. And you're right, David. I don't remember anywhere where the Doug Ford allegedly progressive conservatives ran on any sort of platform that included identity politics. However, I do note that back in 2018, Doug Ford ran on a platform where he pledged to remove the changes to the sex ed curriculum that was at the time developed under the Kathleen Wynne government by the former deputy education minister and convicted child pornographer Benjamin Levin.
Oh, yes.
So how this has crept back into our education system under that same government is quite surprising.
Handing out forms to minors as low as grade 4 to ask them questions about their sexual orientation, gender identity, etc., etc. Stuff they have no business asking, and it is a violation of the children's rights and parental rights. This is the Conservative Party. Wink, wink.
Grin, grin, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say no more.
You know, when are people going to wake up and start standing on their principles? I've asked people, you know, wherever you are, how does your election work? How do you know your vote counts? If they're using computers, how do you know that they're actually counting your vote? What's the transparency? And no one knows. No one I've asked knows. It's faith-based voting, which means it's not democracy. Democracy means you don't trust the government and you have a way to verify. Always transparency and verification. But nowadays, even asking for an investigation when there are people who are boarding up windows or, you know, pulling packages along. In Ontario, all of our municipal elections, they're all done at once. They were all run on an electronic computer system.
Over the next several weeks, thousands of workers will help eligible residents cast their ballots. We spoke with Eleni Armenikis at Elections Ontario to find out more about how this year's vote will work.
This is the first provincial election since the COVID-19 pandemic began. So I'm just wondering, what will Elections Ontario be doing to help ensure there are public health precautions adhered to in polling stations?
So we actually have been working with the Office of the Chief Medical Officer of Health since about 2020 to take their recommendations on what to do and the best practices and what to implement at the polls to protect voters. So the voters will see a lot of what they're already used to in terms of physical distancing, hand sanitizer, disinfecting high-touch services.
What will voters see that's new at the polling stations this year compared to past Ontario elections?
One of the big changes this year is we've got an Elections Ontario app. You can download it and you'll be able to find information about when and where to vote. You'll also be able to find a digital copy of your voter information card, which is really important. Now that's a card you get in the mail. You can now get it on your phone and bring it to the polls, and that has information about when and where to vote. We also have a new online vote by application to apply to vote by mail.
Now for those
So we actually have been working with the Office of the Chief Medical Officer of Health.
So we actually have been working with the Office of the Chief Medical Officer of Health.
Over and over again, the politicians who supported the lockdown and the World Economic Forum's strategies for transforming our society during the COVID paranoia and
mass hysteria.
All of them are getting reelected. Landslide victories. Doug Ford was supposed to be a conservative. He locked people down. He had martial law, though he nicknamed it something else. And in return, the most unpopular politician got a majority government. By the way, record low turnout. It's almost like someone just removed some of the votes so they didn't count. And only one party got counted at the appropriate level, who should have lost. But we don't need to investigate this stuff. We don't need to have public information on how this works. Just believe, just have faith. It's not a religion, it's not a cult. It's utopia, and we're almost there.
Repent, and thou shalt be saved.
What we are very proud of now is the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina, and so on, is that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more half of this cabinet, are for our actually young noble leaders of the world. Grateful.
And that's true in Argentina too. Wow. Yeah. Sorry. That's true in Argentina as well.
It's true in Argentina, and it's true in France now.
Welcome to hell, Blofeld.